Hello everyone, this is Richard, and in this tutorial I will be showing you how to create a Bukkit plugin. So this is going to be a series I'm going to start, and in this specific video we're going to do the basic setup and the first bit of programming. So I'm going to do the very first structure of a plugin, basically. And you can think of this as 4 parts, though I'm not actually splitting them directly into 4 parts. I'm not going to cut or anything, but you can think of it as 4 parts and like 4 separate steps. So the first thing we're going to have to do is download all the software required and set it up. And I already have it downloaded here, but I'm going to show you in the web browser in Firefox where you can get it from. Then the second step is we're going to basically, after that, we're going to set up our test server. It's going to be a Bukkit server so that we can easily test our plugin and launch Minecraft and run it and everything. So after that, we're going to set up Eclipse, and basically after that, we're going to do the very first beginning of our programming of our plugin, and you're actually going to get to do some programming in Java. So first, I'm going to go in our web browser, and if you've ever done modding in Java before, whether Minecraft modding or Bukkit program, like a Bukkit plugin, or any programming in Java before, you'll probably have this already, but if you're new, you won't. And this is called the Java JDK. So you want to make sure it's from oracle.com. As you can see, I have this selected. I've already been to it, that's why it's purple. And when I go there, you can see it says the Java Platform JDK. And that's different than the JRE, which is Java Runtime Environment. If you've ever played Minecraft and it works on the computer you're on right now, you have the JRE installed. But we need the JDK, which is the Java Development Kit, and that's what's going to allow us to compile our Java code, because Minecraft is a game written in Java, and thus Bukkit is a server written in Java, and thus any Bukkit plugins have to also be written in Java. So I already have it downloaded and installed it, but you'll click download. You'll then say accept the license agreement, and then it'll let you download it for your operating system. So basically you're going to want to scroll down here and find Windows, if that's what you use. For me it would be Windows X64, because I have a 64-bit machine. If you're using any other thing, if you're using, say, Linux or Mac OS X, I think Mac OS X already has the JDK installed, though I'm not positive on that. And I'm pretty sure Linux, you can look up how to get the JDK. So that's it. All you'd click is download. You'd run that executable file in Windows, and it'll install it. I already have done that, so I'm not going to do it, so we're going to move on. Next thing you're going to need is Eclipse, and this is at eclipse.org. All the links will be in the description again. So you'll click Downloads once you get to Eclipse, and then you'll want to download Eclipse Standard, because none of this other stuff is really needed when you're doing it in the beginning. So for me, because it says I have a Windows computer, it's detected that. Then it's asking me if I want to download it for Windows. Obviously, if it somehow did not predict the operating system you have right, then you could just pick the other ones from this list. But I would download it for Windows 64-bit. And when you download it, I already have, because it's pretty big, 200 megabytes. It took like 3 minutes, and I have a fairly fast internet connection. It took me 3 minutes to download it still. But no, actually it wasn't 3 minutes. It was like 30 seconds, I think. But yeah, so I already have it here, this zip file. It downloads a zip file. It does download an installer. So I will get into how to handle that in a second. And the third thing you're going to need to do is get Bukkit. And basically that's at dl.bukkit.org, and DL of course stands for download, probably download or downloads. And then you're going to click, for me I'd want to click alternate versions, because there's 2 versions of Minecraft that Bukkit is currently working for at the moment. As you can see, we have the development build, the beta build, and the recommended build. The recommended build is still for 1.6.4. The beta build is for 1.7.2, and the development build is also for 1.7.2. I want to go with the beta build because they're still fairly stable, even though they're not as good as a recommended build, and they are going to let me finally actually create a plugin for 1.7.2 and not for 1.6.4. So you should download the 1.7.2 build. Now, all you have to do is left-click it. It'll bring this up. You click Save File. I'm not going to. I already have it on my desktop. So basically, we have everything now. I can close the web browser. We're done. Close tabs. And now we have this. We have Eclipse. We're ready. And the JDK is already installed. So I'm ready to move on to the second step. And that is going to be setting up our server. So I just want to, I want to quickly, though, decompile this, or not decompile it, extract it so I can show you. So 7-zip here, you right-click. If you don't have 7-zip installed on your computer, you just click extract all. That'll just use Windows, but I prefer 7-zip. I don't like WinRAR that much. 7-zip's a lot lighter weight. So I'm going to say extract here. As you can see, it's quite fast. 7-zip is very lightweight. I really like it. And it's open source, which I always prefer open source software. So we have the Eclipse folder here, and if I double-click it, you can see there's Eclipse.exe. So basically, it doesn't need to install like a regular executable file would and make a shortcut, because that is Eclipse. That's the executable file you'll use. So I'm just going to close that for now, because we've got Eclipse done, basically. And now we're going to set up the server. So we'll click New, we'll click Folder, and I'm going to name it Server. And this is basically just going to store our test environment server. So I'm just going to put the craftbukkit.jar inside of here. And I'm going to put our start.bat. Now the start.bat, if you've ever set up a Bukkit server on a Windows computer, you probably know what I'm doing. But basically the start.bat is just the way you can quickly and easily run the .jar. Never just double-click the .jar, because otherwise you won't be able to get a log or see what's going on your server, and it probably won't launch with enough memory to fully support itself. So as you can see, I'm launching it with 1024 megabytes as the minimum, MS as minimum, and then MX as maximum as well. So that's basically, it's only going to take 1 gig of my 8 gig, 1 gig of RAM in my 8 gig computer. And so now that's just going to launch, and I will just double tap that. And as you can see here, it launches. It says loading libraries. If I were to launch Minecraft right now, I would actually be able to log into the server as soon as it starts. And so it'll say loading profiles. And now I can click play. Really, I also like the new launcher for Minecraft a lot. I have a lot of different profiles for like my different series. Because this is not my only channel. I have another channel with over 2,000 subscribers. It's called Richard Plays MC, and that's where I actually do gameplay videos. So I'm going to click multiplayer, and as you can see, if I do direct connect and then localhost, it's going to log into this server. And this is going to be our test server for Bukkit, for our Bukkit plugins. As you can see, it says Glorfindel22 logged in. So I'm going to disconnect now. I'm going to quit, because we really actually won't need to do any testing. Since we're only developing a basic plugin, our testing will simply be looking at the console. But of course, as the series goes on, we're going to do a lot more advanced stuff, and then we'll actually be testing in-game. I will do event handling, I will do a lot of the other stuff in Bukkit, basically all of it. So stop, and now it's done. So basically our whole server is set up, and obviously we don't want to stick with the desktop as our main folder for development. That's not very smart. So it's just a good way to show things, but I have my own desktop icons that need to be put back. I had to clear my whole desktop just to do this. So I'm going to go to Richard Tech, and we're going to move the stuff here. I'm going to paste it there, just copied 245 meg and moved it. And we're just going to delete these, though I think I actually have the folder for it still open. So let me close that. And sorry, there's Skype going off there. But we're just going to delete that stuff. Empty recycle bin. You have a lot of items that need to be recycled. So we'll just minimize that. So next, I'm going to go over to Richard Tech. And now we're going to actually launch Eclipse and do everything in there for the actual programming end of it. Set up our workspace and do our programming. So now I just moved Eclipse to here. I actually have 2 instances of Eclipse, but I wanted to show you how to set up an instance of Eclipse here for people who had it new, because I had it on my computer prior, because I've been doing a lot of other projects. So we'll use the new one. I think my previous one's Juno, so this is newer. So now it's going to say select a workspace, and a workspace is basically a file, a folder that contains all your that contains projects and their source code and compiled code and basically the libraries and everything relating to that. So I'm going to make our workspace be in Richard, and then it's going to actually be in Richard Tech. So since that's a folder we've been using. And I'm going to actually have it the same as the server workspace. I find that an easy solution to go with generally. So all you would do is click server here, and now you can see it's C users Richard Tech server. I'll click OK. It'll say loading. It generally starts up fairly fast on more modern, newer computers. I have a 3.4 gigahertz processor, so this generally runs fairly well. So yeah, that welcome screen, I'm sorry, I go through things fairly fast because I know it well, but that welcome screen, you just want to close out just like I did, and you should get this environment. Unfortunately, this is still at 720p, which is fairly small, and you'll notice it's awful small, but that's because I wanted to be recording in 1280 by 720, so I had to turn my resolution to that as well, to make sure it was like a 1-for-1 pixel ratio. So basically what I'm going to do is in a few more days, I'm actually going to get a 1080p monitor, and then I'll do all future tutorials on the 1080p monitor, and hopefully that'll make it so I can upload in 1080p HD, and this will be a lot better. But enough about that. We're going to finally start. So we're going to click File and New. And then you're going to say File New. Why do I keep pulling away from that last second? Java Project. And I'm going to name this Tutorial Plugin. So Tutorial Plugin. And obviously you could name it whatever you want. Or if you have a name for your plugin already in mind, you can name it that. If you just want to follow along, I guess, and come up with something quick, you could also name it that. So we're just going to scroll down here, and now you have source, which is where your code is going to be, and this is just the JRE system library. This is the basic Java library. But we're going to want to import another library. Basically, if I go Richard Tech and server, you'll see this craftbukkit.jar, in addition to being the server jar, is also the contains the API for Bukkit. And an API basically allows Java programs to take code from other sources and use them. And because it's building a Bukkit plugin, it needs to take code from Bukkit to interact with it. So I need to use this API for this. So basically what I'm going to do is click copy it, because we need to bring it into our workspace. And I'm going to create a new folder under tutorial plugin. Just right click your project name. And I'm going to say the new folder is called lib, which is short for library, and basically a library is an external source that it's pulling code from. Just like, I guess, the library in real life is an external source you pull knowledge from, I guess you could say. And then we're going to click paste, and now if I click this little down arrow, you'll see craftbukkit.jar right here. So now I actually got to include this. I've copied it into my project, but I haven't included it. So sorry, I really moved too fast, but yeah, you right-click that, you click Properties, then there's Java Build Path, and then you're going to want to click Libraries, and you're going to want to click Add Jar, not Add External Jar, because we actually, for the specific reason we didn't want an external, we spent time and copied this into our workspace, so we want to click Add Jar, and you'll notice it mirrors this. We have Tutorial Plugin, we have Tutorial Plugin. So then we go down, we have lib, and we can just click this, and click OK, and it's done. Now you'll see there's referenced libraries, and CraftBukkit is there. And basically, we've now brought the library in, so now all you have to do is actually start coding a plugin, which sounds pretty hard, but this tutorial and the rest of the series is going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to show you the basic first structure for creating your first plugin. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to click Source, right-click Source, click New, and Package. And basically a Java package is basically a section where there's going to be folders that the code are stored in. And generally, in order to differentiate them, people name packages based on the website. For example, Bukkit.org's is org.bukkit. It's basically the inverse of your website name. But if you don't have a website name, many people don't. I do. But if you don't have a website name, I think you're allowed to use your email address. I think that conforms with the Java conventions. There's no really you're not allowed to or you are allowed to, but there's a lot of conventions and it's what you're supposed to follow in Java. So basically, say, as an example, I do have a website. It is real. It's richardsprojects.net. But it's under construction. I can still use that, and I can say net.richardsprojects. And then we're going to say tutorial plugin. So I'm just going to select all this and cut it. because if you don't have a website, I'm assuming most of you probably don't. If you do, that's fine, great, use it. But if you don't have a website and you want to use your email address, I'll just give an example. Say I had a Yahoo email address, and I was lucky enough to get the email address of Richard, just exactly Richard, at yahoo.com. It would be com.yahoo.richard. It's basically just the reverse of whatever you're using. So that would be fine for the example, but for me, I'm just going to use my website, and we're going to stick with that. So I'm going to use net.richardsprojects.tutorial plugin. I've heard that sometimes you're allowed to use me.whatever, I think, like whatever your username is on certain forums and things. I'm not sure if you are anymore, though, because I'm pretty sure me is now a top-level domain if you own a domain name, so I don't know if that would work exactly. But we're just going to use this, and do not check that. There's no point in doing it. And just click Finish. And you'll see we have this little thing that actually looks like a package. It looks like a little gift that's wrapped up with paper or tape or something. And it's just white, which means it's empty. So we gotta actually put code in there, because it's just an empty package right now. It has no code in it. So I'm gonna create new, right-click, new, and then class. And basically, the naming conventions for a class state that your class should be, each word, it should start with a capital letter, and each word after there should also. So we're going to do tutorial plugin, because since our plugin is named tutorial plugin, the main class of your plugin should always be named the name of the plugin. Again, that's more of a Bukkit convention. And because there's separate words between tutorial and plugin, plugin begins with a P. So we're just going to click Finish. And now it has auto-written your first few lines of code. So congratulations, you have now 4 lines of code. No, 5, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think it's 5. I miscounted there. That was a fail. But yeah, so it's 5, and so we're going to say, now we have this basic class, but we're going to say extends Java plugin. And basically what this means is this class is basically an extension. It's taking from another class. It's taking methods from another class and it's extending it, basically. So Java plugin is a class inside of org.bukkit.plugin.java, which is actually inside of this craftbukkit file. If you were to dissect this Java archive, you would see Java plugin somewhere in here as a compiled class. So we're going to want to import that so that it copies it in. And now every plugin must have 2 methods inside of it, minimum 2, of course. And this is on enable and on disable. So on enable and on disable. And basically what we're going to do is public, which means this method, which is basically, you could think of it like a subroutine. It's a section of code that's executable. Public, it means it's accessible to all other classes. And then we're going to say void, meaning it returns nothing. It basically doesn't return any form like a function would in math. If you know algebra, like functions in algebra return values, but it's not a function. It doesn't return anything. It's void. And then we're going to do the same thing with on disable. We're going to say public void on disable. And we're just going to click this, delete, and boom. So now you have your 2 methods. The problem is they're not overriding. And basically, because this is extending the class, we also want to override the methods. So we're just going to say override, and this basically just means we're overriding the code that's inherited in those methods, obviously. Basically, that name override should be fairly self-explanatory. So now you've basically got the methods that would be considered a plugin. And just to help, I'm going to say git logger. And as you saw when I had the server launched in the command prompt, there was the black and white text log, and that's basically what this logger does. It's going to basically access that log, and it's going to print something out to it. So I'm just going to say git logger, and we're going to just print out so that we can look through this log and make sure it loaded up and wrote out what we told it to. And we're basically going to say, I don't know, I could say tutorial plugin by Richard. And so that'll print that out in the log. And basically, this is considered a plugin. The last thing you have to do is you have to make a plugin.yml file. And that's so that the plugin, when it loads up your Java archive, when it finds it in the plugins folder, can actually load up your class. It can find your plugin and load it. So we're going to say create, under source, we're going to say new, and we're going to create a file. And we're going to name it plugin.yml. And it's going to open up in Notepad by default, but you don't want to do that. You want to close that, right-click it, click Open with Text Editor. And this allows you to open it inside of Eclipse. So this is a very, very specific type of file. It's not Java code, but it has to be written in an exact way or your plugin won't load properly. So the first thing you have to do is name, all lowercase. Has to be all lowercase, with a colon or semicolon, I forget which is which always, and then a space, and then the name. So I'm just going to say tutorial plugin again. And next, and there can be spaces between this. I don't know, I've just always gotten the habit of not having spaces in between them. But that's just a habit from web development because they don't like spaces in names when you develop websites and stuff. So the next thing you're going to have to say is main. And basically this, since this is the main class of your plugin, and this is the first file that Bukkit is going to find when it opens up your plugin, basically main is telling Bukkit where to find the code to your plugin. So what we're going to do is, it's basically going to be inside of this package. So we're telling it net.richardsprojects.tutorial and if you're still confused with this, I can show you stuff at the end. I'm going to show it at the end. Basically, we're going to say tutorial plugin. But once we export this as a .jar, which if you've downloaded plugins in the past, you always notice that you always download a .jar that you put in your plugins folder. I'll show you how the structure works by actually opening up the Java archive, and you can see how everything is organized and how the how Bukkit would read it from a plugin sense. So next we have the main, and finally we have to have version. This is required. And this can be anything, so I'm just going to say version 1.0.0 alpha or something. And you have all the code for a plugin now. For a very, very basic plugin. Obviously, in the few tutorials after this, we're going to elaborate on it. So I'm going to show you how to export this as an actual .jar file. And then I'm going to show you the log and prove it works, and maybe even open up the Java archive and basically so that you can tell what's in it. So now we right-click this, or we don't right-click here, we click File. We click Export. And now we go to Java, and it's not a runnable jar file because you can't run a plugin directly. It's just a jar file. So then we're going to click Next. And we don't want to export the lib because that's already inside. That is the server itself, so there'd be no reason to export it. It would just take insane amount of space up. So now, as you can see under here, we have that under source, and it's going to export everything with it. And we're going to have to click browse, and we're going to click plugins under server. We're already here actually. And I'm going to type in tutorial plugin.jar. I'm going to name it tutorial plugin.jar. And I'm going to click save. And that's it. So basically, do not click finish though. Click next. And I'll tell you why. Basically, we're going to click check save description of this jar in Workspace. And now I can click browse, and I'm going to name this export. And basically what this will allow you to do, if I click finish, it's going to make a export.jar desk, or which shorts I think stands for jar description. And this will allow you to click this and export your code at any time. And this is really handy because it saves time if you want to test just to change your plugin real quick. So now if I go over to server, you'll see we have plugins here. And I'll just real quickly with 7-zip I can open this archive and actually show you the code inside of it. So basically you have the plugin.yml file, which it opens up here. And you notice this is the first file in the archive. And this is basically what Bukkit will reference as soon as it launches, and it will grab this information. And then once it's figured out that the main area is net.richardsprojects.tutorial plugin, then it can go to net. Look how there's a folder net, conveniently. Richard's Projects, tutorial plugin.class. And basically that means it's exported, it's not exported, it's compiled Java code. So now it's actually in the form of what's called bytecode, but that's basically just code that is no longer in a human-readable format, but rather a computer-readable format. I don't want to get too technical in this tutorial, but yeah. So that's what that is. And now, if we go back to server, click start.bat, the server will launch. It's going to say loading libraries, please wait. And it launches successfully, as you can see. And it takes a second, but you can see tutorial plugin, enabling tutorial plugin. Oh, you don't need a V there. So I guess I could fix that real quick. Then it says, it just prints out what we told it to. Tutorial plugin by Richard. And so this is basically your first bit of code. You've congratulate yourself, you've written the first bit of code for a Bukkit plugin. It's actually fairly simple once you get the hang of it. But in the tutorials to come, I'll teach a lot more complex stuff like event handling, accessing the player, adding commands to the server, adding custom recipes. I'm trying to think of anything else. Setting, oh yeah, you can set the texture packs in your plugin that you want a user to download automatically. There's a lot of different things I can cover because you can have plugins in Bukkit that do a lot of different things. So yeah, I hope this has basically given you an idea of how it works. And yeah. So thanks for watching. Richard out.